All right, for all you future business leaders out there, welcome. Today we're taking a really deep dive into a concept that honestly sits at the very core of microeconomics and, more importantly, your future corporate strategy. We're talking about market failure. We're going to pull apart the hidden costs that almost never show up on a company's balance sheet, but, well, society ends up paying for them every single day. So let's just kick things off with a big question. As a manager, right? You set a price, it covers your costs, hopefully gives you a nice profit. But is that price tag telling the whole story? Does it really truly reflect the total cost of bringing that product or service to the market? The answer, you'll see, is almost always a resounding no. And understanding that gap, the space between the price and the true cost, is absolutely essential for any kind of modern business strategy. So here's our game plan. We're going to walk through this step by step. First, we'll look at the flaw in that perfect market model they teach you about. Then we'll define the two critical types of costs you need to know. After that, we'll actually visualize how this whole thing creates a major disconnect in the market. And finally, we'll get down to business and calculate the real price of this inefficiency. Okay, let's jump in.
Okay, first things first. We have to understand the textbook model of a perfect market. You know, the ideal scenario. We need to do that so we can see exactly where the cracks start to show up and why it's actually a pretty dangerous model to rely on all by itself in the real world.
You know, the theory itself is actually beautiful in its simplicity. In a perfectly efficient market, the supply curve, that's the cost to produce something, and the demand curve, the value people place on it, they meet at this perfect price, an equilibrium. It's the sweet spot where the cost of making just one more item is exactly equal to the benefit someone gets from buying it in this perfect, ideal world. Every single cost is accounted for. And right here, this is the crucial point where theory just smacks right into reality. This perfect model, it completely falls apart when some costs are, well, kind of left off the bill. Economists have a name for these: externalities. Think of them as the side effects of production that impact somebody else, a third party, but the producer never actually pays for them. And this is where that simple idea of cost gets a whole lot more complicated.
So to really get this, we have to distinguish between two very different bottom lines. There's the company's bottom line, and then there's society's bottom line. Let's break down these two different types of costs and see what they really mean for you and your business.
So on one side, we've got what's called the Marginal Private Cost, or MPC for short. Just think of this as what you, the producer, are paying directly out of your own pocket. But on the other side, we have the Marginal Social Cost, or MSC. Now this is your cost plus all those external costs that get passed on to everybody else. Let's take a closer look at each one.
Now, the marginal private cost, this should all sound super familiar to you. It's everything you'd list on a business plan or a quarterly expense report. It's the cost to make one more unit of your product. You know, the raw materials, your employees' wages, the rent on your building, the fuel for your delivery trucks. This MPC, this is what makes up the standard supply curve in your basic Econ 101 model.
Okay, let's make this real. Think about a ride-sharing company. Their private costs are pretty obvious, right? They're paying their drivers, covering fuel and maintenance, they've got app development, huge marketing budgets, and of course all the corporate overhead like rent and salaries. These are the direct out-of-pocket expenses that a manager has to track, and they're what directly hit the company's profitability. But here's the other side of that coin: the marginal social cost. This is the total, the full cost of production. It starts with the company's private costs, sure, everything we just listed, but then it adds on those hidden, external costs. Things like environmental damage or public health problems that are a direct result of the business's operation.
So let's go back to our ride-sharing company. What are its external costs? Well, every extra car they put on the road adds to traffic jams, right? That slows everyone else down. The exhaust fumes contribute to air pollution and can lead to health issues down the line. All those extra miles cause wear and tear on public roads that, taxpayers have to pay to fix. The company doesn't get a direct bill for any of this, but believe me, society is absolutely paying the price.
This all boils down to a simple but incredibly powerful formula. The true social cost is the private cost you pay plus that unaccounted for external cost. Now, if there are no externalities, great, then MSC equals MPC, and the market is efficient. But as soon as external costs pop up, the two numbers diverge, and that's exactly where the problems begin.
So what does this disconnect actually look like on a graph? This is where you can visually see the market failure in action. It's really powerful. We're about to see two different supply curves, and each one tells a completely different story about the real cost of doing business. So in a free, totally unregulated market, businesses operate based on their private costs. That makes sense. So the market settles on a price and quantity right where the supply curve, which represents that marginal private cost, the MPC, crosses the demand curve. This gives us our market price and our market quantity. For most managers, this is just business as usual. But here's the kicker. Because that private cost is artificially low, it's ignoring all those external damages we talked about, the price the market settles on is also too low. And what happens when something is cheap? Well, people buy more of it. The result is overproduction. From society's point of view, we are getting way too much of this good simply because its full cost isn't baked into the price tag.
The socially optimal point, however, the place we want the market to be, is found where the marginal social cost curve crosses the demand curve. You see, this higher supply curve includes all those external costs like pollution and congestion. And this new equilibrium point gives us a higher, more honest price and a lower, more sustainable quantity. The gap between these 2 points, that right there, is the market failure.
So, okay, we've established we have an inefficient outcome. But can we actually measure the cost of that inefficiency to society? Yes, absolutely, and economists have a very specific name for it.
This loss is called deadweight welfare loss. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it represents the value that is just lost. It's gone forever from society because the market is producing at the wrong quantity. It's economic value that is simply wiped out because the market isn't accounting for all the costs.
Now, let's just think about what this quote is really saying. For every single unit produced beyond that socially optimal point, the true cost to society, including pollution, health problems, all of it, was actually greater than the benefit the consumer got from it. We are literally spending more in social value to make something than it's even worth to us. That is the literal definition of waste.
And look, this isn't just some abstract theory for a classroom. This idea of deadweight loss is the core economic justification for government interventions like carbon taxes or pollution permits or new regulations. The goal of all these policies is to force producers to internalize the externality. In other words, to make their private costs line up with the true social cost, pushing the market back toward that more efficient outcome. So, we'll leave you with this to chew on. As a future leader, you have to ask yourself this question. If my business's success depends on passing these costs onto the public, who is actually paying that bill? And maybe more importantly, in a world that is getting more and more focused on sustainability and corporate responsibility, for how long is that going to be a viable strategy?